Hey guys, this is the first look at one of the new dungeons in the War Within called the Rookery. This 3 boss dungeon is the first dungeon you will encounter while leveling up in the War Within and is located right inside the new capital city Dornegal on the Isle of Dorn. It's home to the Storm Riders and their Storm Rooks. Void has corrupted some of the Storm Riders and their Storm Rooks, and we are going in to investigate what happens in the Rookery. At the start of the dungeon, you will encounter corrupted Storm Riders, a mini boss, and a Storm Rook. Mini boss casts an ability, a bouncing void that shoots out a ball, like the Maiden in Dawn of the Infinite, Murozon's Rise. There's a cursed Storm Rook that casts Charge Bombardment that causes the bird to dash out, cast an AoE on the group. This bird can actually be avoided if you stay to the right and then not pull the trash pack at all. Trash on the other side is a little bit easier because they just have ability and it only does damage to the tank. Once you kill both trash packs in front of the Storm Rooks, you can free them by clicking on that orb and take a Storm Rook across to the Rookery. Once you've landed at the Rookery, go inside, and this is the room for the first boss of the dungeon, Kyrios. All of the trash in here is not required to fight the boss, but it is recommended to clear the room so that you have space to fight the boss for one of his mechanics, which we will see in a little bit. The trash in here is similar to the trash at the beginning. There's this one big bird that does a tank frontal, which you should point away from your group. The other bird is similar to the one at the start. Once you've made your way to the boss has 4 abilities on normal. One is a chain lightning, which is simple chain lightning that bounces from the targeted player to 3 other players. And another is the lightning dash, where he charges and will knock back players if you're inside the AoE. There's also a debuff that the boss applies, Unstable Charge, and that player with the debuff must LOS the whole group, otherwise it explodes and does damage. When the boss's energy reaches 100, the boss will fly to the center of the room and do a beam that rotates around the room, which is why it is recommended to clear as much of the room as possible. Otherwise, you may run into trash while you're fighting the boss. And once the boss lands, it will repeat the abilities until it gets back to 100 energy. I found that the boss gets back to 100 energy relatively fast. Hopefully they will change that. Otherwise, it is very anti-melee friendly because the boss will fly back to the center relatively quickly and you lose a lot of uptime. Personally, I'm not a big fan of the boss because there's an LOS mechanic. You're pretty much required to fight the boss at certain spots in the room and then run around in the circle. Once you've killed the boss, you jump down, and there are feathers that you can click on that will give you a slow fall to make your way down the Rookery. There are Storm Rooks on the sides that you can free, but I wasn't quite sure what they do. It's possible that they are part of an achievement. So I did not do that. Once you've landed, there are new trash packs that are also void corrupted. They have void themed abilities. One ability will pull you in towards a melee. Another is a caster that applies a shield that absorbs a lot of damage on the enemy targets. There's not a whole lot of trash in this dungeon. Trash pools are relatively small. The dungeon itself is pretty short, being a 3-boss dungeon as well. Thinking about it from the perspective of Mythic Plus, this is probably close to a 30-minute dungeon, I would imagine. Once you've made your way down the stairs, we'll reach the second boss's room. When you first get into the second boss's room, there are small trash mobs around that will automatically aggro, and you just kill them. They just have an on-death explosion. The boss itself has 3 abilities. It's a pretty simple boss. One is a targeted ground AoE. The boss will jump on a player and leave a void zone on the ground and shoot beams out of that void zone like Smolderon in a Myrdrasil. The next ability is a dark gravity that pulls you in, and if you're inside, you will take a lot of damage and it'll knock you back. Boss's third ability is Chaotic Corruption, which puts a debuff on a player, and that debuff will jump to the closest player, and that'll happen 3 times. On Mythic, it'll leave debuff on the player that makes you take increased damage from Chaotic Corruption, prevent you from bouncing it back to the same players over and over per debuff. Overall, this is a pretty simple boss. Not a lot of mechanics, but some cool visuals. Once you've defeated the boss, you need to unlock the dock lift by killing this NPC guarding it. The NPC has 2 void orbs accompanying it, and NPC can control the void orbs. Once you've killed the NPC, you can jump down the dock lift and you enter the last area where the last boss is. Spawn the last boss, you kill these voidstone monstrosities around the room. Voidstone monstrosities also have a void shell that they apply to themselves called Embrace the Void, which cannot be stopped, and it'll absorb damage and pulse AoE at the same time. When you break the shell, the mob will take increased damage. The thing about that void shell that they apply to themselves is it's a 20-second duration and a 20-second cooldown. So if you don't break the shell in time, or if you break the shell at the end, it'll recast it shortly after. So it's pretty punishing. I can imagine it'd be pretty punishing on Mythic Plus, especially when there's 2 of them and they cast it at the same time. Hopefully they change it so that they cast one at a time, like they did with the other mobs that have a pulsing AoE in Mythic Plus, and increase the cooldown on it. There's also an NPC that flies around, and will spawn those blue swirls on the ground. You can drag the enemies into the blue swirl to stun them. I don't think it does damage, or if it does, it doesn't do a lot of damage, but it is a stun on the mob. Once you've cleared the room of all of the Voidstone monstrosities, the final boss will spawn. The final boss is one of those immobile bosses on the ground. So one of its abilities is if nobody is in melee range, then the boss would do a big AoE on the whole group, like Brawl in Waycrest Manor. Second boss's ability is called Oblivion Wave and is a frontal targeted at the tank. Part of the boss fight, you'll notice that the boss has an absorb shield, Void Shell, which absorbs 20% of his health. Once you break that shield, the NPC that's flying around the room will damage the boss for 20% of the boss's health and stun the boss, and it'll also spawn Void Chunks. The Void Chunks cast Reshape, and if the cast is successful, it'll spawn an ad that pulses a ramping AoE. So it is imperative to kill the Void Chunks as fast as possible. I believe you have 15 seconds. And once you kill the Void Chunks, phase repeats. Another boss ability is called Unleash Corruption. Applies a debuff to two players that explodes and drops a void zone on the ground. And the boss also does Latent Void, that does a knockback and creates void swirlies on the ground for you to dodge. That's it for the Rookery in War Within Alpha. Let me know what you guys think of the dungeon in the comments below. And if you wanted to see anything else within the alpha that you want me to check out, let me know and we'll try to put together a video for it.